All right. Welcome back. This is another episode of Make Hazmat Great Again. We've got two very special guests today. Two guys that I've known for a long time, very special friends. Chief Matt Soer from the Warrensburg Fire Department, and now recently promoted Chief Mark Jenkins. Also, congratulations on your recent promotion. So we'll get started. Mark, do you want to give a quick bio of yourself for us?
Yeah, sure. I think we're all pretty humble in what we do, and thank you all for taking your time out, man, and visiting with everybody. Mark Jenkins, and I'm old country boy, as you can tell as I speak from time to time. I've been in the fire service for a little bit, 30 years actually this month. I started out as a volunteer, and then my neighboring area that I live at, and then for 18 and a half years, I was working for a Columbia Fire Department, and started the hazmat team there, and of course, really busy. I'm involved with training. And then also I belong to Missouri Task Force 1 now. So I back to Columbia. I just made battalion chief yesterday. I found out. So I got a week and I take that spot. So I'm really, really excited. And then I also belong to Missouri Task Force 1 of 28 FEMA urban search and rescue teams with you, Nick. I've been on with them now for 22 and a half years. So actually on the hazmat side of things. And so I really enjoy it. Lots of learning.
Yeah, that's where we met, right? That's first connection was task force. So yeah, 100%. Cool. How about you, Chief Soer?
Yeah. So Matt Soer, Warrensburg Fire Department. I'm the division chief of training and safety here. Been around the Warrensburg department since 2009. And take a little brief hiatus in there. And I started in the fire service back in 2002, just south of St. Louis City. So about 22 years, going on 23 years in the fire service, fire and EMS. Pretty psyched to be here. I think it's gonna be great. I know very little about hazmat, which makes this even better. So I'm pretty jazzed.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I think it's gonna be a good discussion today. And like we talked about before, talking about a subject near and dear to my heart, and all you guys too, I know for sure, is training. So not just hazmat training, but just training. Period. What we all kind of go through and deal with at our respective departments. And some of the things that maybe we can get together and just talk about a couple of issues and things that go well, things that don't go so well, and so on and so forth. So I'll leave it up to my co-host here, Kyle, Captain Kyle, and let him start out with the first question.
Once again, guys, thanks for both of you guys coming on, hanging out with me and Nick for a little while. Matt, I've been to Warrensburg before, taught some classes. I missed the last one. I know you guys just had us down there doing the truck company stuff.
Yeah.
And I had to bail on that one. Had too much other stuff going on. But the guys, we had a couple new instructors that went down there, and they came back and just had a blast. So I know, kind of what Nick said, like building the training culture. And then Chief, I know you said you're big on training and everything. That's kind of one of my roles. And I mean, honestly, how me and Nick started a lot of this stuff is just building the hazmat training and getting some of that. So like, one of the stuff I know, Matt, you've got a pretty good training culture down there that I've been to, and Chief is just if you guys tell us about the culture at your departments. I know a little bit about Columbia. I don't know if you guys are a little bit bigger, but just kind of dive in. Tell us a little bit about the training culture and kind of some stuff that you guys have built into there.
Mark, you gonna run with it, or do you want me to?
Sure, I'll roll with it. Right.
There you go.
I think the culture, when you use that term, it's a pretty awesome term when the culture is the people that we work with. We have to be open-minded. As Nick knows, we all train a lot. We try to do really good at what we do. But here's the deal. I'm only an expert for what I know. And I don't want to say expert. I know what I know. I know what people have taught me. As you all saying, you're going to go watch, was it Mulan or something later on or something?
Moana,
Moana. Moana. It's kind of like, I always say, the world of training is kind of like Star Wars, right? You only live within your force field, or like Jar Jar Binks, I only know what's inside of my bubble. And so the training of culture within Columbia is great because we got people to go to outside classes. They bring this back. Now, there's a way to approach that to your training staff to be able to present to your department, right? The socializing, the norming that make things normal, and to get buy-in from their people. I'm going to be honest, when I started at my department probably 18 and a half years ago, training maybe wasn't the main priority, right? We have always done it this way. And why do we want to change? And I remember new guys pulling hose, and they're like, man, I learned this cool hose load. They're like, whoa, we've tried this the last 10 years. You haven't been here. But they kind of hit a barrier. They didn't want to accept the change. And so now a lot of these guys are kind of retiring out. And I will hate to say, but these new generation of firefighters, say what you want, they're very progressive. We have a great training culture at our department now. We got people that are bringing back good stuff, and what that does is that does nothing but fuel the guys, right? So we can only have so much time to go down and do training at the academy, once a month, twice a month, whatever it may be. But those station officers have that energy, and they take it back at their daily stations. I watch these guys go out and train right after lunch instead of taking a nap. So I think the culture is there, man, but it only takes one or two positive people to create that culture. And now one station, they may be the I don't want to say the negativity people, but we all have those on our departments, right?
Yeah.
And so those stations, you may have to go out there and you may have to feed them a little bit more, share them some excitement. Go out there and say, hey, I'm gonna throw my pack on there and pull some hose with you. Let's do this. Let's do some forcing some doors, right? Because what a fireman want to do, as Brian Seitz says in the world of fire service, it's one of his classes, firemen want to do fireman shit. And if they don't do that, they get bored and they're going to get monotony. And that's when the negativity, the talking, all those things start happening. So I think a culture of training, definitely in my department, we're there, man. I think things are getting better. There's always room to improve, and the guys see that. And we have to be open-minded to be progressive and listen and be able to implement those.
Yeah, I agree with the newer generation 100% with what you said. Like I almost call it like my proud dad moment. We got a brand new younger kid on my crew, early 20s, and I'm at the house with all the rescue stuff, and we have rope systems set up in the hose tower. It was like dinner time one night. It's like, where is everybody? Go out there, and like the new guy and like three of our other guys on our shift are like hanging in the hose tower doing pickoffs and all this stuff. I'm like, guys, it's dinner. Like dinner's in like 5 more minutes. We're almost done with this. I'm like, man, this is awesome. Like, I like,
Yeah.
can I join? Like, we'll push dinner off. Let's keep having fun with this stuff. So I mean, it is changing a lot, and I think it's taken a little bit of time to get in there. So I got spoiled. We had a great culture that a senior guy that's retired from me started building. So it makes my job easier. But I mean, it's kind of neat with the younger guys coming in, that energy, wanting to do all that stuff. So
yeah. So kind of for us, every department's different, right? So again, when I came in fire service law, like what Chief was saying, same thing. I feel like there was almost more of an emphasis on keeping the firehouse clean than there was training.
Right.
Not that cleanliness and being proud of our equipment isn't important. I think we can lose some of that as well if we're not careful. But the training wasn't exactly where I think we could have been. We were on the right track though. As the years went on, it got better and better and better. I think the biggest thing is that I look at some of the bigger agencies that aren't that far away from us. The luxury that they have usually is that they have the senior guys been there 20, 30 years that are, that may still be a backseater or an engineer to kind of do that mentorship with our younger guys. When smaller agencies like us, I think the issue that we run into is when you lose folks to a large metropolitan area, you lose that experience. You lose that knowledge in many ways, that institutional knowledge sometimes. So we have a whole plethora of young guys. But again, to double back on what you guys were saying, I have not seen in my time in the fire service the eagerness and the willingness to train that I have as I have probably in the last 4 years. These guys want to get out there. They want to do stuff. So the bright side is that even though I got a younger staff, they are so jazzed to get out there and do stuff. They're like, they're asking me to go get them acquired structures. They're asking for, get good vehicle accident props. So like a good example, we're teaching a Fire 102 class right now. We're finishing up. And I have a really good relationship with our local tow yard. And they're bringing in cars for my Fire 102 students to cut up. One of my captains and one of my crews was like, why don't we call the gas company? They're next door. Have them bring their equipment over and flip over some of these cars. We'll throw mannequins in them and we'll crush the cars down and actually create real accidents instead of just a vehicle on 4 wheels that we can cut. That's cookie cutter. Let's change it up. So these guys are taking it on their own and running with it. And I'm like, go. Like, I mean, as long as it's, we're not doing anything dumb, have fun, be smart about it. These guys. And I know I have faith in my people that they're going to do that. My officers know what they're doing. My senior folks know what they're doing and they're getting it done. So, building a training culture, a lot of it is having faith in your people. It's rough when you have a lot of 22, 23-year-olds. It's hard to have faith in them when they've only been on the job 6 months. So you got to kind of throttle that a little bit based on experience. But especially your officers who have been here 20, 30 years, it's a little bit easier to hand the reins over to them and let them run. So I think that's a big part of the success and buy-in to a training culture is you have got to invest back that trust that they're putting in you. And it is a give and take system that doesn't stop. And I think that's the biggest lesson is like, I'm going to be fighting that, hopefully not fighting it. I'm going to be working with that give and take till the day I retire. And that's how it should be. That's what keeps me honest. That's what keeps them honest.
Yeah.
Well said, man. Yeah.
Do you guys have, I know Chief Soer, like getting into the, like building your year out, and especially us coming into a new year. Is there stuff you guys look at, like building your training plans for the entire year? And especially like Columbia, if you guys are much bigger, and then kind of balancing like your time frames we've talked about. So like balancing the time frames of, hey, I got to get these basic skills done. But then also we've got like the spec ops stuff also, and like kind of the other not basic training. Like, how do you guys balance a lot of that? Now, that's one of the biggest things we fall into for like my role of keeping it basic for everybody. Cause I mean, I'm a true believer and we got to keep the basics strong, but then also we got to do all the other stuff that we're responsible for too. So is there like an equal balance that you guys figure out, or how's that kind of go for your departments?
I think I'll go first if that's all right.
Yeah, go. Yeah, run with it.
So, and you're right, it's a balance. And one thing I really say, you have to sit down at the beginning of the year. Like right now, we're sitting down. What does the calendar look like for next year, right? Because we all know ISO requires you to have so many hours of training, for facilities, medical, all these types of things we have to do. And there's a lot to balance in there. And I think the main thing is again, we got to give the guys trainings. They want that stuff in a different type of atmosphere. Like you're saying down there, Chief, the trainings, go into an acquired structure. So what we do is we base it off. I don't want to say you have certain standards that you follow off of, but we build those trainings up. So there's a minimum level you do. Well, we take those up and we do 5 or 6 skills. So if it's forcible entry, we all have, skills you have to perform, which is called competency for your organizations. And so we'll build off that competency and we'll maybe do forcible entry, put that in front of the burn building, do burn building. And then we're going to do VES at the exact same time and pull those people in. And then also with ours, we have the technical rescue team and the hazmat team. We got great guys that help do this. I oversee the hazmat team and another guy on my department does the technical rescue. And I'm on both teams. So I really enjoy that because that helps me understand how things work. And we rotate those. So odd months are tech rescue specialized training, and then even months are all hazmat. So that just happens. And then twice a year, we get all the department guys together and do 8 hours of tech rescue, and they have to do 8 hours of hazmat also. So June and December is their months for like hazmat, and then vice versa for tech rescue. But there's a lot to have to meet, and you want to meet those standards because you owe that to your department, to the customers that we serve in our organizations, to make sure we're up on our skills, as well as for administration, making sure we're doing the right thing. And we want to keep everybody safe. As you were saying, Chief, that training is it's an eager environment. People want it. They want to love that. And we have to have that buy-in from these people, because how many times have we all went and trained on a weekend? We're like, that's my day off. Wait a minute, right? Or how about this? You train on a holiday. Well, you know what? Fires happen on holidays. We work on holidays. Right. You have to be able to control those emotions and make sure everybody mentally, just not physically, but mentally ready to do their job. So training is huge. There's so much. I never realized till I got in the training role what happens on the background. As like you said, you like some days you go home. That's why I'm losing my hair, I think. But you're like, what am I doing wrong? But that means I'm doing something right, because what we're doing is we're building this next people up to people with less time than me or even more time. They're going to be taking my roles. They're going to be like, well, I want to teach this training now. So you're getting buy-in from your people. So I think training, the schedules are huge. So.
Something I've done is we incorporated, our chief got us building out committees for a lot of different things. And one of them was having a training committee. So I have representatives from captain's ranks, my senior guys, my newer guys, have part-time. We have part-time staff to supplement our full-time. So some of our part-timers, which is a huge benefit because those guys work full-time in the KC Metro. So I'm getting some perspective from the Kansas City area down here, which is kind of nice, to just see how somebody's doing something different. And if it works, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So what I do is I sit down probably about 3 months out from the new calendar year, and I plan out my year. I'm doing something different this time around. Usually what we had one of our past chiefs brought in before he retired, a system where we would focus per quarter on different topics. And it would usually revolve around engine company ops, truck company ops, RIT or a backup line situation, and then a quarter dedicated to specialized operations. So hazmat, rescue, things of that nature. We operated on that training calendar for probably about 4 years. There was benefits to that. It was kind of nice that you made sure you were sharing in the pie of hitting not only your ISO hours, which are important, we know, but it was also getting the guys an opportunity to be making sure that everybody is pulling hose line, that everybody is getting familiar with the truck, because I don't have a dedicated truck company. My guys cross staff. We got aerials at both stations. They're both 105-foot tower ladders. So I got to get them to where they're competent, not just in pulling hose, but that on the next fire, they're able to, throw a ladder, and that they can also man a backup line and know what that means. So we were going on that model, and it worked. But the feedback I was getting from the training committee was like, look, A shift has got this down. They're solid. Their guys are squared away on this. But B shift is really struggling in the same area. But then there's stuff that B shift's doing great, that C shift is not, but C shift is doing great. And so there was this constant going round and round and round. And I was finding that I was getting more people that wanted an individualized approach. So the captains were coming to me and going, hey, look, can I just work on this kid with forcible entry? The rest of my guys are knocking it out of the water. They're getting the door open in no time. They're not really feeling a challenge, even when we're up in the stakes. And I'm just using that as an example. So what I've done this year is something a little different. And we're going to see how it works. And I'll let you guys know in a year if it pans out. But each month I set out a calendar and said, this is the theme. All right. I trust my captains to get it done. All my captains are instructor ones, if not instructor twos. They've worked with me for a long time. I started with some of these guys. I know that all of them are solid and squared away. So I say, just get it done. Here's the topic. I trust you to do it per our standard and per the industry standard. Just get it done. And I'm finding that I'm getting more excitement so far. As I said, this is still kind of in its infancy of stepping back and not being so much, here's a JPR book, step by step by step, this is what you need to do. And so I think that's important. This is a hazmat podcast. I have the luxury, my deputy chief, I think he works with some of you guys on task force, Chief Oxley, he's been around the hazmat game for some time. And so every year he's bringing us through whatever. He's like, hey, we really need to hit decon, or hey, let's do some more. We got a lot of kids coming in. They're not familiar with the four-gas. Keeping it simple for us because we're at an operations level. We don't have a tech team. So we're trying to curtail that knowledge as well. And then we just got a ton of us through tech rescue through the state bid. We got state bid to bring that in. TTRS came out and taught awareness, ops, and tech. So now we're incorporating ropes every month. Now that one, because it's newer, we are having more of this is the goal for the month. Hey, we're going to do, work on this system and not just Z rigs, but let's switch it up. How do we go to make a complex system beyond that? Something of that nature. But as far as the bread and butter stuff, I shouldn't have to tell you to pull hose line every month with your new guy.
Right.
My captains know that and they do it. And so that's what's kind of nice is I'm finding a hands-off approach. I'm actually getting more buy-in. It's not that they weren't doing it before. I feel like I'm getting more enthusiasm because my folks are also having to pre-plan, and I'm sure you guys are doing some of this too. You're pre-planning, you're running calls, you're doing October, recently you're doing PR events all month. And so I'm trying to be respectful of their time too and their time management skills. We're trying to invest in our officers to tell them that we trust them to get stuff done. And I think training gives us the opportunity to let them do that. So I'm trying that approach this year.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good way to empower your officers and not just have it all land squarely on your shoulders. And that makes your life easier too if you can trust them and be like, hey, we need to do hoses this month or whatever it is. I'm gonna let you guys figure that out and take pictures if you want, send them to me, and maybe we can spread that out. But I think with special operations training is that we have lots of hats that we have to wear, and that's just the way it is, and we have to be good at all of them. You know, the public, when we get to their call, their emergency isn't like, oh, well, that's okay. Like, you did hoses. You're really good at hoses, but you're not so good at ropes. But I'm dangling on the side of this building. Like, that's okay that you're not good or you can't make this rescue. No, you know, that's not the way it works. But I think with, at least with special operations training, along with the basic stuff that we have to do, special operations in and of itself requires special time, requires special hours, requires special things that you have to do, because when you're doing these things like hazmat, you know, rope rescue, trench, task force, whatever it is, it's going to require some more time. Hence the special part, right? Everybody wants to do the special stuff when it's you know, when it's sexy and when it's like you're in the news and all that stuff, but that time that we all put in, and everybody here has done that, but you know, when we're calibrating meters and we're making sure we're ready to go for the next call, when we're making sure the ropes are squared away, that's not really what people want when they when they talk about special ops. But yeah,
that's usually when we see everybody run away is when we pull the hazmat meters out. Like, hey, let's go over calibration. You see people start scratching their heads and
yeah,
gone.
they start kind of looking around and be like,
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna go eat. Yeah.
Well, it's the problem too, and I agree with you. Like, everybody wants to do the sexy thing.
Right.
Everybody wants to do the fun thing, but you have to be honest with yourself. Like, we know that, like, if there's a hazmat incident in our run area, we are automatically calling for aid from a hazmat team because we're not equipped to handle it. And that's okay. It's just, that's the resources we have given. We have Whiteman Air Force Base right next door. They have a hazmat team. We have Kansas City. We have some of the area departments in the metro that can help as well. But like you just said, Nick, like, just knowing your monitors and knowing how to calibrate it, and it's boring. But it's like I try to remind especially my younger firefighters, like, guys, it's the crawl, walk, run method. Right. You guys are in the crawl method, but you're already some of you, and I appreciate your eagerness, but you guys are already trying to run and you don't even know how to crawl yet.
Right.
Learn the basics first. Like, that's what's going to help us succeed. You know, I remember the first time we ever had a dive rescue call that I got to go on, being a tender on the shore, I kind of felt useless. And then it was like we had this old guy that Nick knew well, rest in peace, Jack Reynolds.
Yeah.
You know, Jack kind of pulled me off to the side. He's an awesome dude. And he's like, buddy, this is where it begins. He goes, I didn't just jump in the water one day. And, you know, 19-year-old me is like, oh yeah, that does make sense. I just didn't think about it. Because in the moment you feel left out, but you really realize that it does take the team approach. And the hardest part, I think, for training, especially in the special rescue and hazmat realm, you know, when you do have someone eager for that, is like, you guys got to slow down a little bit and listen to these older guys. And I think that's the hardest part, because you don't want to put out their flame, right, but you also, you got to build it.
Yeah.
There's equal balance with that. And I've had that talk too, because we do a lot of spec rescue stuff where I'm at. And man, I found the same thing. Like, some of these newer guys are go, go, go. And we'll get into rope stuff or hazmat or no matter what it is. And they're like 3 or 4 steps ahead because they've taken a couple classes, and it's the same thing. And you can see the senior guys, like, smoke coming out of their ears, like, kid, like, slow down, like, you. And then that's huge. And that is a hard balance, because, like, having those talks with some of these guys, like, man, I love this. I love everything you're doing, taking these classes. I love this all. But you got to slow down. I'm like, you cannot run 3 steps ahead because you learned this in a class, and it's not accurate to what we're doing. But yeah, have you found a lot of difficulty, like, finding that balance, or how's that working for you guys?
For me, I would say, as far as like the class stuff, we've been doing a lot of stuff together as a unit. And I will say I've had really good buy-in from our guys of just like, they recognize my training committee, especially with ropes. They're like, hey, we just took this class and we're already seeing like we're forgetting stuff. I'm like, you're right, I am too. And so, like, making sure we're trying to bring in CEU stuff to stay current, but to also be aware of, hey, and I'm very proud of it. One of my guys, he's 22 years old. He came up, he's like, hey, Chief, I forgot how to do I think it was like a tandem Prusik belay or something like that. And he's newer and he's learning. And I'm like, I appreciate you even owning up to it instead of trying to hide. That's a very important thing that you know how to do. Let's sit down and go over it. And then his crew end up taking care of it. And they're like, hey, man, we got you. And they brought it through. But it's like, I've been very impressed that my folks have been owning it of, hey, this is where I'm actually really good at. And then passing that knowledge on to the next group versus also being able to say, hey, I don't know how to do this. Can someone help me out? So I will say overall, like my group has been doing pretty solid. Again, sometimes you get those eager beavers in there and they're just like wanting to go. And we have to kind of throttle them a little bit. But that's been my worst problem. And I'll take that, I think, over people being inactive any day.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
And I agree, because you're creating a good culture, because you're like, hey, if they will admit, that's a big part of it. Because I don't know about you all, when I first got in the fire service, you didn't admit that you didn't know how to do something, or
No.
you couldn't
Yes.
be good at throwing a ladder, right? Because you felt like you were this big. And now it's like, okay, guys will take their time with you. They'll take those one-on-one time, maybe pull you over after the drill or on another day, say, hey guys, we're gonna go pull ladders for fun. Hey, I want to just work on this. And that allows them to build up on their skills, right? Because not all of us are good at pulling hose. Not all of us are good at doing ladders, but we have to be able to do them. And to create, I guess, a good environment for them to learn. Because when I first got on, I don't know about you all, but some days we had some bigger guys in my department when I got on, maybe just not the ones that were good at it. And anytime we knew we were doing live burns all day, they called in sick, right? They just didn't want to show up, and they always avoided that. And avoidance is always one of the first things that people do, and that's a sign of a problem. And as like you said, Chief, you worked on your training schedule and you made things happen. You got buy-in, and now we got guys they'll sign up for an overtime day. Hey, you're going to do that training again. I'd like to go do that, man. I think I can improve on this. I can do this widget, use this widget better, or I can improve on things. So I think you nailed it when you said you got to create that good culture for training. And it's okay to say, I need some help, or
Right.
I may know, right?
Can I ask a question to the group?
Yeah.
But I'm going to direct it to Chief as well. So, like, I don't know, for you, have you guys had any issue with, we were talking about buying and like I said, the sexy stuff, as Nick mentioned, but like, let's talk about lithium ion, or let's talk about solar. Very important and very prevalent in our society, but not as fun to sit through a PowerPoint on it because you may not have a prop. So now we got to go back to the lecture. How are you guys getting buy-in for that? Are you getting, because I would be venture to say you guys aren't getting the same eagerness to run to those classes as you are, a really awesome hazmat specialist class or a tech class or a live fire class.
I'll go first. I think that anytime you can show that stuff and identify it in your district at my level, which is private, and say, hey, there's one of those photovoltaic systems that we talked about or that we heard about. Let's go check that out real quick on your way back from an EMS call. Or, hey, there's a EV charger that they're putting in this new building. Let's go take a look at it. We've heard about it. We have a really good fire marshal's office that kind of gives us heads up on that stuff. But I think when you're out and you have opportunities to go check that out in your own district, in your own area, not just this, this unicorn PV system that you saw on TV, I think that really gets buy-in. And I think you said it, Mark, and you might have quoted somebody else, but when firemen do real fireman stuff, and I consider this real fireman stuff, just going and checking things out and knowing your area, they feel a lot better. That all that negativity, all that bitching kind of floats away in my experience when you do that in your own place,
Yeah, that's old Chief Brian Seitz says that.
Yeah.
Nick, and you said, and like you all were saying about this electronic stuff, one thing we've done too is when the power outages happen, we get in a fire truck and we drive. And the guys are like, well, they have power here. And I'm like, no, look on top of that light and there's a solar panel on top of it. Or look how many houses are lit up, just not of everything else, like outside lights on the outside of them. And like you all were talking, that really shows you where panels could be on the side of a house. Now it's power in this house. And the guys were like, oh man, I didn't realize that. And I said, well, that's crazy because I didn't know that either. So, so it's like you said, it's situational awareness, because death by PowerPoint, one thing learned about an instructor years ago. I do a little traveling and teaching on my days off with a really good friend of mine. And one of the biggest things is we get to a class and they say, where's your PowerPoint? We don't use one, because I feel if you have to use a PowerPoint on some things, you're going to lose the interest of your guys, right? They want to have that, oh my gosh, you actually, you don't have to be an expert at it, but what you got to do is give them good information. Maybe it's going to be skills that day. Maybe it's going to be talking about a subject. And guess what? If I don't know the subject, I'll bring another guy in from my department that's really good at ladders or tech rescue, whatever it might be. And that's where the guys are like, oh my gosh. And so they feel that enthusiasm. So PowerPoints can get tough. Unfortunately, it's a necessary part of what we do, but we have target solutions for that. I don't know if you all use target solutions also. Yeah. I see everybody smile. They're like, oh, this hurts. And what do the guys do? They go click, click. And what are they really getting out of that? So I think there's a method behind everything. And the stuff we do today is not going to work tomorrow. It's not going to work next month. Right. And it's us getting together and talking about what is working, and taking leadership classes and instructor classes and you know what, talking to our people. Because I found out after the last recruit school, I was like, hey, man, something I thought went really well and was going really good after the class. They're like, it kind of sucked. And they told me why. And I'm like, you know what, you nailed it. So it's about perception. What I think may not be the best way for people to learn. So I need to listen to everybody's advice and to be able to give that lesson plan better. Or ladders can't be taught like what we taught ladders years ago, or hose or smoothbore stuff now. So everything's changing.
Yeah, we've got at our place with the lithium ion stuff, we got kind of lucky. A year or two ago, we started getting a run of lithium ion battery fires. And a couple of them that really opened a lot of eyes for our guys of making it relevant. And we ran 3 or 4 of these things back to back, and it was kind of spread out across the shifts. So it was very eye-opening on the different fire behavior and all that. So that really, for us in our department, like everybody wanted to learn about that. Like that was the hot topic. So we, as a training division, we jumped on it and had some guest speakers come in. Same thing, like you said, Chief, like I'm not an expert at lithium ion. Like this is a newer topic for us. So we jumped on it and got some expert people to come in and teach it and hit on that stuff. And kind of like off of what you were saying, Matt, of, like you said something about this hazmat podcast, and that's kind of how a lot of this stuff started. And I'm kind of curious, especially with like Columbia, where you guys do that and balancing some of that training. How do you guys keep everybody involved? Like when you come out and say, hey, we're doing hazmat tech training, because that's been one of the biggest things for us at my department on bringing that back and making it fun, making it sexy again. And it's not the PowerPoints like you said. It's bringing in people like Nick and his assistant chief and doing a lot of hands-on stuff that I've found, trying to re-engage people, because it's not one of those calls that we run every day. So how do you guys go about like keeping people engaged with that kind of training and like dovetail off of what Matt was saying of like, this isn't always the fun stuff, especially when you bring up that stuff. We mentioned earlier, you see everybody like, oh man, it's lunchtime, I got to run. And then diving into it, keeping their attention. Yeah.
So hazmat is one of those devil words that people, as soon as you say that, right, they're going to cuss and you're like, wash your mouth out with soap. Right. But you're right. I've had a great privilege. I think what gives me the enthusiasm, one, I like hazmat. I'm one of those weird guys, but I've been traveling across the state of Missouri 8 or 9 years teaching the curriculum. So what I do is I steal from other departments. I don't steal from other departments, but I steal how they do things. What is your techniques? How are you training your people, right? How do you get buy-in? Well, people, just like you said, they just don't want to do a meter. Well, give them a whole carbon monoxide incident for a situation, and have them go in there checking the stove to see how the seal originally comes up and then it goes back down. Seeing those rate of fall things. You have to do realistic scenarios. And let's admit too, we have 3 different shifts on my department. Some shifts have more hazmat people than other. Why is that? It's because the culture, right? Some people on there are total badasses and will pull a hose, to the space shuttle because they're just that good, but they don't focus on hazmat, and that's okay. So you have to be able to find that balance, and how that balance happens, I believe, is having good trainings. If you're able to trade time on that shift and say, hey, this is how hazmat can be trained, because we all know if all of us taught one subject, we would all teach it a little bit different. And they may say, well, Mark's he's not into that subject like Matt is or Nick is. And so I think you have to have good people that are presenting the information to your people to get buy-in. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
It's a necessary deal. I mean, we just did another hazmat tech class at our department. And I was really surprised. One shift had 9 people go through it, and the other shifts had 2 or 3. And why was that? Because, people talk excited about things. Like, you all really excited to go watch this movie tonight. I'm like, I really don't know what it's about, right? My kids are older now, so I don't know. But if you don't have nobody that can relate to that subject, how do you know to make it exciting, right?
Yeah.
And so they're just like, it's there. You can take it if you want. Versus, man, it's there. This is what it encounters. Just like you talking about tech rescue, getting people involved off of that. And car rescues, with extrication, you have to be able to get buy-in. What's enthusiasm? Well, let them, if they want to flip that car. Let's do it, man. We're here. The car's here. You got the tools. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And they will never forget that, how you have bestowed upon that. And you know what they always say, leading from the back. That's what you're doing, man. You're creating a great culture at y'all's departments.
Yeah, it's a good.
Yeah, I think. Oh, go ahead, Nick. I'm sorry.
No, I think that's a good point. Like, I know as an instructor, I get kind of stagnant sometimes the way I teach things, but that's why I go to conferences and seek out those different ways of doing things. Like you said, Mark, it's very valuable because then I can bring that back. Even if it's a suggestion from a student, say, hey, why don't we try this? But just having the courage to be like, yeah, okay, let's do it, instead of being like, nah, I'm going to do it my way because that's the way I've always done it. I think that gets more people engaged. Like, hey, he actually listened to me, and we actually had a better drill and more interesting drill. But yeah,
and let's admit, everybody in our department, and you're all's probably too, man, we got it so bad. We don't have this, we don't have that, right? And then you travel outside, you go look at other departments, and you're like, man,
Yes.
we got it, man. We got good stuff. We got good equipment. We got administration that supports us. We got the tools to make it happen. We may not have all the money, but guess what? We can make things work. We're firemen, right? We can build things. We can do things.
right.
And that's what's cool about what we do.
Yeah, for us, I think there's 2 things with buy-in that help. If you don't have a self-starter that just really sees the value in something without having already done it, you get a new person who's never messed with hazmat, but they can understand the value and understanding hazmat. That's beautiful, or anything for that matter, any topic. 2 things that I've noticed that help. One, a charismatic instructor that's more than 30 miles away and has a briefcase always helps, because you're not an expert unless you're 30 miles away with a briefcase. I have a chief officer that's always told me that, and it's true. It is hilarious. I'll be saying something over and over again. The guys be like, yeah, okay, but they don't really buy it. And then I'll have someone come from a class that I brought in. We paid someone to come in and talk. They'll say exactly what I said. And then they're like, yes, that's it. And it's like, okay, well, Chief Hovelman said the same thing I said 30 days ago. And I don't understand. Yeah. Well, I mean, he's a great dude. I think he's an amazing speaker, but it's like, I was saying that. I learned it from him. So I think that's part of it, is bringing in outside experience, because, people have biases and perceptions. It doesn't mean that they don't like you. It just means that they have a bias because of something you've done, something you've taught. It doesn't mean that you're bad. It doesn't mean that they think you're bad. It just means that they're going to understand something differently when they hear it fresh. I think that's a very important thing that we need to understand as people, that our brains develop and they absorb information in different ways depending on the situation that we're in. So that's one. 2 is running a call that required the skill and you were unable to do it. I think embarrassment or the shoulda, coulda, wouldas of a situation are huge. We had, unfortunately, a couple of years ago, we had a recovery of a little girl who fell in a cistern 30, 40 feet down and drowned. My crew that went out, they were trained in rope. They did an amazing job. It was a very difficult call. The crew was professional. They did an excellent job. They went down, they executed the rescue, or the recovery, I should say, performed the recovery. But that was an eye-opener to us department of, oh my God, we haven't done a confined space recovery in years. And one of our chiefs who's been on the job 35 years, I think, he was there running safety, and he was like, I cannot recall a time that we've run this exact call in my time at this agency. So it was an eye opener of a situation that could happen. It was a mutual aid call. We were called out to run it. After that, I had an amazing amount of buy-in for rope rescue. Shortly after, we had a tower rescue right after TCRS came in and taught us, and we had to go up 110 feet to get a worker down that was in distress with a safety line that was jammed. I think having those calls helps. I was telling Nick about a call we had the other day, a really weird hazmat call, where we were getting readings out of faucets in a residential neighborhood of up to almost 1,000 parts per million of an unknown hydrocarbon only when the water was running. You know, it was interesting. My crew, that's actually the crew that's on today, running it, and they're trying to figure out what the heck's going on. And two of them, it was their homes and their subdivision. So their spouses are there trying to figure out. And I think having that hit close to home made them see the value of, oh, wow, this is something that we should help, know how to figure out. And the guys did a great job in investigating that. So I think having something hit close to home and realizing, oh, this is valid. It's not just something made up that we're talking about a scenario that happened 20 years ago before some of our people were even born. And working in the fire service, they can't relate to that, and nor do they care to. There's an apathy there. They're like, okay, that's a sweet story, dude, but it doesn't apply to me.
Right.
So I would having those experiences and then having someone come in that is a charismatic instructor that does come with a resume of, oh, wow, this person's done it. Kyle, I'll throw it to you. When you guys came in and taught an active shooter class for us, we had, and I think you and I talked about this, we had a possible active shooter incident at our local hospital. We had one years ago at a local high school. Unfortunately, the young man passed away as a result of what was going on, but no one else was harmed. And so these things do happen. But you guys coming in with your experiences with Ferguson and with some other incidents of active shooter incidents in the St. Louis area really captivated my guys' attention. Guys and gals, they were like, oh, wow, because they saw the conviction with which you guys taught. And they're like, oh, these guys have been there. And I think that is huge.
Yeah, that outside presence makes a huge difference. Like I've done that a couple times with we got recently Chief Jamie Young from St. Charles. We brought him in, and it was the same thing. Like same stuff. We preach and preach, and then you get him come in and different outside perspective. And he talked for 3 hours straight, and you would have heard a pin drop. Like everybody's just glued to him. And our whole battalion, he did all 3 shifts, and like he walked away. And I got so many phone calls and text messages like, oh my gosh, he's amazing, he's great. And like it's the same stuff. Like there's no like he puts
the same thing when Jamie came up and taught. Same thing happened with my guys.
Yeah. And he brings so
great.
He's
an excellent speaker.
Yeah, he has so much passion with his delivery and everything. It's just like you can't argue with him. Like he's coming in guns a-blazing with it. Well, like some of that, like how do you guys handle in your departments and just keeping the passion going for the training and keep building the culture like within yourselves? Like what makes you guys like get up in the morning and just like champions at the training and keep going and diving and dealing with some of the I'm sure everybody's got those negative people, but like for you guys, what keeps that drive going with you?
What makes you tick?
Yeah.
Man, my wife's smacking me.
Yeah. That's all of us.
I think, what I think I really get a lot of my excitement was we've all been at those busy stations, where the guys get their butt hammered all night. We're working 48 96s now. They may get up 3 or 4 times, and the next day they got to run calls. Okay. And so it doesn't matter what it is, but it's the officers that create that culture on the crew, man. It can be the shittiest station. I'm sorry for cussing there, but it can be the most terrible station. I mean, the best station, but a bad officer will change that. And so to create a positive environment is to see the officers excited. They'll go out there and they do things. They hang out late with their guys. One thing I always tell guys too, when we get done eating, we're going to sit here and talk. Let's talk. Push your plate away so you don't stick your hands in it as we talk. I talk with my hands a lot. And because they need to hear the stories of the past too. What was that weird smell? I remember one time I went with an officer and he goes, man, he goes, you smell that? It was 2 a.m. I'm like, yeah, I smell it. Something's on fire. I was really excited. I'm like, this house is burning. I didn't know I was a new fireman. He walks over to the dishwasher, opens it up, and it was a plastic cup on top of the heating element in the dishwasher. And then I've told that story to 3 or 4 guys, and a couple of them have come back and they said, hey, Mark, you remember that story you told me? That happened to me, right? Yeah. So sometimes it's the physical training, but the handle training. So things like that help me tick. That helps me keep going. Because I don't know about you all, especially when I go teach hazmat for 8 hours, I'll get back to the motel at the end of the night or at my workplace, and I'm like, I am so exhausted. I just want to go to bed right now.
Yeah.
But when I see other people and are like, man, I appreciate you teaching me. Like you always talking about these great instructors that have inspired you all. When you see things, you hear things, you want to be those people. And you know what? I want to make sure that I'm always leaving the department better than what it is, because these guys that I work with could be running my family, on a call. And I want to make sure they're ready, that we don't miss a step. And you know what? I told my wife last night, I said, as I just got this promotion, I said, it becomes a huge responsibility also, because I want to see my guys go home safe each day.
Absolutely.
They got to go home and see their families. And so I think training is what makes all of us tick. If we didn't train, how are we going to make sure everybody's safe, the customer's safe at 1 or 2 in the morning in the middle of the day? So I think the overall, I want to do a good job for the people we serve, the community, and make sure our people are safe too also. So that's a big drive of mine for training. And man, I just love getting out and doing stuff, right? We're all high energy. Otherwise we wouldn't be in this environment.
I think for me, what kind of makes me tick, I would say, is I've always enjoyed teaching. There was a while there where I wasn't sure if I was going to just go be a volunteer in the fire service and teach. I got my degree in education. I think I love watching the learning process. I like probably one of my favorite things to teach is recruits. I love teaching recruits. And not to be confused with Fire 1 and 2. That's a different monster, but recruits. And so I think watching somebody on their first day come in, especially a green kid, come in at 18 to the fire service, and they're so excited to start their first day in the fire service. And it doesn't matter how many times I get to do it or be a part of it. I always enjoyed that. And I enjoyed that when I was new, even being the new guy. They're like, hey, this guy came on 6 months after you. Can you just show him the rig? I love doing that. I love sharing that learning process with somebody. And I think that really is kind of what makes me tick and go. And it's difficult sometimes, because now that I'm working admin and I'm in the 40-hour role, a huge part of what made me tick for a long time was the camaraderie. I love dinner time at the firehouse. That's probably one of my favorite things, was dinner time and going out to the picnic table and having a cigar afterwards. It was one of my favorite things, and sitting and talking with the guys and telling war stories of calls past. And at our station 2, which I worked at a lot, and Nick knows, there's a and he probably remembers, there's a boom box that's up. It was up on an upper shelf above the washer and dryer. Nick, do you remember what I'm talking about?
I remember the picnic table, but I'm struggling to remember the boombox.
Yeah, and we had a chief that always had us on this classic rock station that played, for some reason, only could play Journey and Def Leppard. It was like KC95 in St. Louis, so like that's all it would ever play. And so just like those memories right there, that nostalgia really kind of keeps me going now that I'm admin, because I don't get that connection with the crews in that way anymore. I connect with them in different ways, connect with them on the grounds. I'm still operational in the sense of like, I can float over and captain a truck if they need me to, or do, I handled something as a chief officer today on a call. And so we're small enough, I can still have that flexibility, which is still fun. I like going to fires still. Last fire went on me, and the fire marshal did primary search just because we were short staffed. Like, so it was a hoot. I haven't, gone on inside a fire with him in years. And so it was a great time. Those things still keep me going. But in lieu of that, and during those slow times, and I'm sitting here in my office typing away, doing emails, and going, what have I done to myself, moving to 40 hours instead of being on shift. You know, I really think back to like, and Chief hit it on the head. You know, these guys coming in could run my wife and daughters one day, and I want to make sure that they are okay, or if my parents are visiting or whoever, you know. And not just that, like I genuinely believe in the mission. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know if I had the emotional maturity to believe in the mission of the fire service until recently. If I'm being 100% honest with you, a lot of therapy helped in getting over some bad calls, and some self diving in of understanding. I listen to these guys like, I just want to go on fires, just want to run calls, just want to go on fires. And it really took me running enough of these fires and run some bad fires and, you know, running some bad calls and seeing the terrible side and also seeing the beautiful side of when we have made a great save, or when we have saved a house or saved something important to a family. And now with a little more maturity under my belt, I ain't 100% there yet, of actually seeing the benefit of that to the community and truly understanding what service is. I think I'm starting to get a better grasp of that every day I walk into this office of like, oh, this is the impact we're actually making. And so I think that's kind of what gets me going every day. And especially when I'm down, because we all get burned out at times. We all get tired and we're all like, look, I love the job. I need a vacation. I need a beach and I need a drink to hang out and relax in the sand. And that would be nice. And we all need that. It just, you know, that's what kind of keeps me going through the rough times.
Yeah. I think just to chime in here on two of those things that you guys said that I want to touch on real quick, but especially for the training, you know, I've heard guys as an instructor be like, man, I'm not really into the mission that much, but I think that training in its purest form is insurance for if all you care about is going home at night and making it back to your family. Training is that insurance, right? Training is going to get you there. Training is going to get you back to your family. That's what I tell my wife, because I do a lot of stuff outside of work, and Kyle knows, and all you guys know because you guys are cut from the same cloth. But a lot of my off days, like today and yesterday, I was off, but I'm helping teach hazmat refresher. But this training, and I tell my wife this when she gets a little like, and again, it's a work life balance, but when she's griping a little bit, it's like, hey, can't you just take a day off? Like, why are you going to this class again? It's like, hey, you got to understand that this what I learn at this class might get me home on that call. You know, it might save me. It might save someone that I serve, that I'm sworn to protect. It might save a crew member, you know, a member of our fire family, and bring them home. So that's what keeps me going when I get in my lulls. You know, it keeps me like, all right, why am I doing this? Like, I don't want to be here today. I just want to be home, laying in bed. Like, this is what gets me out the door, is that insurance, I call it. Something that you said, Chief Jenkins, was that the stories that we carry in each of our organizations are so valuable, because I think I went to a conference over the summer, and this guy from Oklahoma was big on recording everything, like doing a really detailed after action reviews with video and pictures. But I think those stories are not documented like we can these days, but that was the documentation of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, was, hey, I'm passing down these stories, and those stories, as well as these trainings that you go to, can save your life one day. Like, hey,
Yeah.
I saw this thing on this roof one time right before it collapsed. And I've heard a story from, I think it was Anthony Castros when I took one of his classes, but he said that this guy heard that from a conversation that they had outside of a class even, but he was at a conference, had a conversation with the guy who this almost happened to. He almost fell through the roof, and he was able to see that on a real call, and it saved him and his crew. So these stories keep us alive sometimes. Whether I know guys poo-poo on those stories, like, oh, that's a cool story, you know, okay, boomer, that kind of stuff. But those stories
Yes.
can save your life, and they can make you look like a hero when you heard it and you actually paid attention, you actually look into it. So spot on with that.
Yesterday we have an alumni breakfast once a month, and we bring back guys who've retired or left even, over the years that are now retired. We do it once a month, and we cook them breakfast and have coffee. And I got a guy that was on Warrensburg back in 1962.
Wow.
And we got guys who just recently retired. I got one guy, he started here in the 80s, retired out of Raytown as a chief, and then he comes in and has coffee with us. And just the stories that they tell, and I impress. I got a rookie with us. We just got on, and I told him, I said, you really need to be at breakfast on Tuesday. And he was getting off work that morning, and he goes, yeah, I'll stick around. A great kid, real eager. I said, just listen to what they're talking about, and just the story, like you said, of hey, that we had this cut job. This is how we handled it. They were telling a story a couple months back, and it's one I've heard a million times, but they're telling it again. The old guys, reliving the tale, but about a dude that was impaled with a guardrail, went through the vehicle and impaled him, and how they were able to cut that off without cooking him, using a torch and trying to get. But how are you doing that without heating up the metal? And how they work through that method was just as good in the early 80s when they ran that call as it would be today. It was like, yeah, the tools have changed, but the steps they went through to be able to package him for transport and even get him off that rail were invaluable. And that man is still alive today. Wow. And so it's like, it's wild, because they're like, it's like, if you guys would just listen, not that they're not, but it's like, that's why I kind of tell the new kid who's coming in, it's his first week. I'm like, just listen. You're going to gain something, and you may think that I'm crazy or they're boring, but that call, and I've had that where the old guys were telling a tale, and I'm like, okay, whatever. And it's like, oh crap, we're in that moment again. 20, 30 years later, I remember how to go through those steps.
Right.
Yeah, that kitchen table and that stuff's priceless. Yes. And then we always joke, like, we've got the crews, I'm sure you guys do the same, that play the video games. Like, that is one of the biggest, like, you'll come in and they've got their whole, like, we've got a crew that brings in, like, everybody brings in their own TV, and it looks like NASA. Yep. and there with all their stuff. And we had one of these guys work trade time on our shift, and like, I'm a big thing, and like when we were talking about the company officers, and like my senior guy that is on my shift is our driver. And we always sit at the kitchen table. And if we're not at the kitchen table after dinner, we're in the back of the bay where we have a bunch of the old office chairs. And these are like the crummiest chairs ever, but they just like somebody got tired of sitting on a cooler. So like, hey, we got this other office chair out here. And we have those conversations. And that's where a lot of that stuff. And it's just so much better camaraderie, and it builds. And we've had that turn into like talking about something, and the next thing you know, like, oh, let's get off the truck and look at it real quick. Maybe 8 o'clock at night, and we're just kind of building that out. But like when you're talking about the breakfast and bringing in some of the retirees, we've got a few of our guys that have left, and this is where I've started joking, like I'm starting to get in that older group now of like, I've got guys that are retiring that I actually had the opportunity to work with. So it's not like and you're like, oh man, we worked with this guy and I've never met him before. Now it's like guys I've worked with the last 10 years that are leaving. Like, man, that hurts that you're actually retiring. Yeah. But I invite those guys up to dinner, breakfast, and all that stuff whenever I can. And same thing. And we had my VC's huge on that, and he invited like 6 one night. Like, we're gonna do a big dinner, and we invited all these retirees up, and that was the coolest thing ever, to just sit back and listen and watch. And it made their day, because they were like, oh man, right. I'm coming back to the engine house, but they started telling those stories, and you look, and like the new guys are just like enthralled, and to sit back and watch that is just amazing. Like the stuff that these guys and their lessons, and like having those conversations again is pretty cool.
Yeah. I hate to say it, fellas, but we're becoming the old guys if we're not there already.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Yeah.
I had that realization the other day.
Yeah.
But I'll throw one thing with that. We are getting old. I graduated high school just a couple of years ago. But one thing in high school, you talk about listening to people, and you talk about the guardrail. Hey, it's never happened here before. But I remember in school in history class, there was a sign on the wall, and I don't know who this quote's from, but it says, history is condemned to repeat itself. Right. And just as much, if you didn't share that guardrail story, they would be like, I don't know. So you talked about it. You talk about relevance. We just got done doing a hazmat tech class, and the guys go, we don't run no calls. I don't know how this is ever going to go. We ran a hazmat call, radioactive isotopes. There was a medical transport 2 days later after they passed.
Wow.
And they're like, man, this just happened, right? And so that enthusiasm with your stories, like you're saying, that's our job as training officers, right? And to be better stewards of the fire services, to keep people excited every day, whether it's a small story or something big. There's accomplishments, and I don't say we have to have participation awards, but we need to be that we're all noticed, right? So that's where we need to be. And I think all of our jobs of like you said, is learning, is to do the best for all the people.
Yeah. Kind of segue into this, but and I know Mark, with your previous position just recently of safety, you were a training captain and you had safety responsibility too on calls. But how do you guys? I want to get your all of you guys' takes on it. But how do you think safety and training are related? You know, I don't mean it to sound like an interview question here, but you know, it just makes some parallels. What do you guys think?
I will say 1,000 times over, it's very relevant. Okay, there's two different components, and that's why it has the safety and it has a slash, and this says training, right? You have to be able to combine those at the point in time you need. One of the biggest things we did to safety officer was because we always running into house fires, right? And like we have for years, but no, the only person that was sitting outside was the battalion chief and the division chief. And there wasn't really somebody doing that continual 360 looking at things. And if you don't do the training or you know the concepts of it, like you're doing a 1 and 2 class or recruits, right? You have to be able to look for these signs when smoke changes. Because I don't know about you all, I got on 18 and a half years ago, and house fires definitely burn different than what I do. And what I've learned the last year being a safety officer, stuff's happening faster, man. You know, why are we sending people to the roof? Because it's going through quicker. And so the safety aspects of it, in the training, I can see that we don't need to send somebody to that roof. And so I can relay that information back on to the chiefs based on what I'm seeing to help make good decisions. And just because I'm the safety every day, 8 o'clock, I'm down at recruit school every day and I'm there till they leave at 5 o'clock at night. We're very fortunate. We have a training academy staff. You know, we have a chief officer down there. We actually got retired fire guy to come back and actually is a civilian teacher now for the fire department. What does that do? That gets buy-in because they go, look, this guy loves it still. He's come back and still doing it. So the training, I'm still very involved. I'll help with this, teach recruit schools and be involved, man. And so I think every department probably should have a safety officer. I think this is a concept we've been missing. When it first come out, I was like, I don't know if that's for me, right? You know, I'm a guy that trucks. I like to break stuff. I like to do stuff. But when you see the positivity, just like you all, I can see the smiles on your face. I love this, of how passionate you all are about training and want to see people do better. And that's what makes all of us good training people, and to be able to use those skills on our people. So I don't know if that really answered your question, but I think you have to add that slash in there. You have to know when that slash is going to be separated, right? Is it leaning this way, or is it leaning towards training, or is it leaning towards safety captain? And when I go out on calls, just like what you were saying, Chief, down there, I can see where they maybe need a little bit more extrication practice, or maybe we need to work on the rescue struts or whatever it needs to be. And I can incorporate that, and it doesn't degrade or make people feel like they're a failure. We can just say, hey, I'm going to go do forcible entry training because maybe at the last house fire I seen, they weren't breaking through very good, right? And so now we implement that, and we put a correction factor in, so the next time we can try and improve on how we do things.
Yeah. I would say for me, the best safety is preventative. And that's what we do in training. And so if I can teach you to be smart and safe now in a calm environment, you're gonna convert that over when you're on scene, whether it's a hazmat, whether it's a fire, whether it's a wreck, whether it's a medical call. You know, there's different hills we're having to climb and battle on. I think generationally, a big one that we've been lucky about, as opposed to our forefathers packing up with structure fires. So just throw that one out there. You know, I know when my dad started in the fire service, he rode tailboard on a 1953 central fire truck for years. They had only a handful of packs for the whole department. I mean, it just, and obviously, and like what Chief just said, fire, our heat release rate is quicker now, and there's a lot of different dynamics that have changed. But nonetheless, smoke is smoke. And I know that's not a blanket statement. Don't murder me. But it's one of those things of where it's still toxic, all right, in different forms, and we know it causes cancer. And so what I'm finding now is that, like, when I started, it was take your pack off. We're on overhaul. Why would you be wearing that?
Right.
And I breathed way too much smoke that I shouldn't have been for many years out of ignorance and bravado. And whereas now I still have, I think sometimes we forget ourselves. And one, especially in training, we have to be the example, even if it goes against everything we remember doing, or we think it makes us look nerdy, or it makes you look like the bad guy. I've had a few of those moments where it's like, I really hate saying this to them because I feel hypocritical because I used to do it. Hey, man, I know, but you don't want to wear your pack anymore, but you got to wear your pack. There's still smoke. Let's get a 4-gas in there. Let's get our cyanide meter in there. Let's be checking levels. We're doing a far better job, I think, historically now than what we were. But it's those kind of things that we're teaching it in the training room helps. Having that retiree that had occupational cancer come back in and say, yeah, by the way, I really wish I would have worn my pack, or I really wish I would have deconned because I have prostate cancer now. And maybe, just maybe, not saying it would have, not saying it should have, but maybe if I would have taken that a little more seriously, or we would have known, I wouldn't be in this predicament. And so it's like I'm trying to implement that on the front end without scaring the new kids about all the things of the ways you could die in this job. But I think it also does them a disservice if they don't know that. And that's from traffic safety to everywhere in between. So whenever they do get that run, it's muscle memory. And then hopefully my job as safety officer, I get on scene, I look and I'm like, oh, I don't have to do anything. I'm still doing my 360s. Things go wrong. Buildings collapse. Accidents happen. I had a dude, years ago that was on fire with twisted his ankle. There was a hole in the yard and he didn't see it. We all know these things are going to happen. It's just a matter of if we can catch the big stuff in the classroom or in the training ground ahead of time. I think that's what truly makes the job safe. And I'm practicing that culture of safety, of being smart and making it to where, yeah, we are going to wear our packs and overhaul, or, hey, when you are on a traffic scene, wear your vest. Maybe that will help somebody actually see you. Maybe not, but I'd rather err on the side of caution and get that muscle memory in now. So that's kind of my approach on the safety front.
I'll just chime in real quick. Just had a thought here, but I think there, obviously you guys go to conferences, there's kind of a culture war going on right now in the fire service where it's safety versus, aggressiveness. And I'm all about being aggressive 100,000%. And I think safety gets kind of a shitty name because I've studied safety. I studied it in school there at Warrensburg when I was with you, Matt. But I think as far as the fire service is concerned, the safety comes from competence. And how you get competence is through training. And there's no other shortcuts. I mean, you can't policy something. Is safety it to death and policy the risk out of what we do. There's always going to be risk. But are you going to be prepared with your training to be able to handle that risk and be competent? Or are you going to be like, man, my training let me down. I wish I would have gone to that class, or I wish I would have done something else to better prepare me for that. So I think, but those two extremes, there's the safety Nazis, which is BS. Then there's the kamikazes, which also is very dangerous. And I don't think that's very good either. But again, I said that, you get safety through competence and you get competence through training. And I think they all kind of go together hand in hand, 100,000%.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think just because you're aggressive, I think automatically the term is, well, you're aggressive, so you can't be safe. And unfortunately, I have been, at different conferences around and talking to different guys across the U.S. about this. And there is that divide of, well, you guys are being too safe. You got to risk it. You got to risk it. And it's like, I think we can all agree there's a time and place where we have to risk and risk a lot to save a lot, right? We've been taught that term since we all started. I think everybody in this chat right now was taught that at some point. We risk a lot to save a lot. But I think you're right, Nick. Like, if we're training properly and even on the job training, you're doing OJT, having that senior person or that officer be like, hey, kid, you need to be doing X, Y, and Z to make sure you go home at the end of the day to see your family, so helping keep them alive. I think there is a difference. I think if you're just doing aggressive stuff for the sake of aggressiveness because you think that makes you look cool, or whether you really do genuinely believe that is the only way to do it. We can do things aggressively. We can do vent enter search. We can do aggressive tactics, but we can be smart. And the way we are smart is exercising beforehand, so our cardiac health is good, and knowing that we can get in our gear fast and getting those things down, like you're saying, Nick, on the training ground.
Right.
That's where that needs to happen.
Yeah. I always say like aggressive and smart have to go together, and that goes like what Nick was saying, like you have to be competent and trained on that stuff. You can't just go in there, and that's what, like, because we have those talks a lot, like, oh man, this person's aggressive. Yeah, I'm like, but they know what they're talking about, they know what they're doing. I mean, that's where like I came on, and everybody's like, I think that goes along with like their reputations and stuff. Like, those firefighters that, especially like outside guys you're on mutual aid with, and everybody's like, man, they're a good dude, they're a good squared away firefighter. But then you start looking at it, it's like, man, they're aggressive, but they're smart about it too. I mean, that's way like our fire district is, that we're so spread out. You got one side's completely rural and one side's urban and commercial properties and stuff like that. And that's what we tell our guys, like, it's two completely different animals. You have to know it all, and that goes along, like Nick said, the training and competence and stuff like that to be able to make that stuff happen. So
what do you guys do to kind of recenter yourselves on the mission and kind of tune out the bullshit, when you're in the trenches?
All you, Mark. All you. Take these.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, right.
hand that up to the newbies.
I'm going to tell you, I think we've all been there. We've all been there. When I first got on my department 18.5 years ago, I asked to go to training. You know what they said? No. You want to know why? It's because, one, we didn't have training leave, right? Or this class isn't relevant to you, or what, and this and that. And I think a lot of it, guys, I got to give credit to my family, my spouse and everything. What keeps me going when I'm getting kicked in the nuts is she's like, you need to go to these classes. You need to learn, right? And so I would trade time. I would take vacation, and I would go take extra classes to try and learn. For one, to better myself, but there's a way of tact to be able to bring that back and present that to your people. And if people see that happening enough times, then you build that culture like, man, I want to go to that training. And so now in my department, if we put in for training leave, for the most part, you're going to get it, right? They're going to give you time off, and people want to go train to be able to learn. So how do I keep doing that? And how do I keep digging is one, my department really supports me now. And I think they showed that. I remember a while back, one of the chief officers told me, he goes, Mark, after your interview, he goes, you spoke well. He goes, we forget about how much our department didn't support you in doing these types of things, but you kept digging. And he goes, how did you do it? And I said, I looked around and I said, it's people sitting beside me. I said, these guys, I said, I'm just happy to be on today. I got the job offer. You want to know why? Because I love this job. Matter of fact, I've been off for a week and a half and I'm so ready to go back to work, right? I'm that guy. So how do I keep digging is that it's the people around me at the fire station. They come in and say, hey, Mark, you're doing this as a training captain. What do you think about doing this type of training? This type of scenario. I'm like, oh my gosh, man, I never even thought about that. And I'll say, hey, why don't you sit down with me and we'll write this lesson plan up together, right? And so what that does is it takes some of the responsibility off of me, and they're learning how, one, to create lesson plans and to create a good program for the rest of the guys. And so I find that very encouraging to me when I see how other people get empowered, and how you can pass the share the workload, as I have to say, because I don't know. And Matt, I know, you documenting everything to making sure you're meeting your hours. And then after everybody's done at 5:00, you're still working, man. Come on. Yeah. You don't go home. And then when each of us, you sit there and your wife's like, are you done yet? Or whatever. You're like, I just got a little bit more. So it's that dig, and we have to be able to get buy-in from the rest of our other guys, which we do, to help us succeed. And like Matt was saying earlier, seeing these new recruits, I got people. So my kids are older, in their 20s. I got people my kids went to school with joining the fire service and seeing how they're doing stuff now. And man, that's what takes the kick out of the nuts. I ain't gonna lie. You know what? And I know their parents, and they know me, and the kids come up and they say, "Mr. Jenkins," I'm like, well, we're not in high school anymore, all right? But it helps empower me, because like you all said, we are getting older, and we have to keep that excitement going to people. Like Matt said, bringing the new guys in, the retiree guys. We can't forget about these guys, right? Because they're a big part of it, and that takes that kick out also, to understand that, guys, I don't know about you all, the more we move up in our career, the less people we have to share stories with, right? Or who we can say things to, because that's just part of the job, right? So we have to be able to relate to things. And so to hear people, as I always say, let your people talk, right? We don't necessarily do all the talking anymore, but let them talk, because they need to be heard. And you know what? We need to hear their perspective. And so I think that really takes the whole kick out of it for me, to understand that they still have the love for the fire service, doing the right things for the right things.
Yeah, Mark hit it. That's definitely a huge part of it. And I think that's a lot of it. Yeah, my guys give me crap all the time, because if I like go home early, or like I hit my 40 hours for the week, they'd be like, "Oh, you're already leaving? What was it, 1:00?" And it just busting my balls nonstop. I got a crew that does it every single shift. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. It doesn't matter if I put in 60 hours for the week. If I leave for lunch, like, "Oh, you're going home to eat?" That's weird. And it's like, okay. But they don't see the work that goes on in the evening. They don't see me answering emails. They don't see me prepping for a lesson the next day, laying in bed while my wife's like, "Hey, you need to be present with us." So something that's actually helped me, and kind of going off of that, was my family. And again, I agree with Mark. My wife is a very honest person, and I love her for it. And she keeps me honest. And that was one of the things where, like, I was getting lost in my work in the late 20 teens. And it really took a wake up call about 2020, 2021, a little bit post COVID-ish, that I needed to start taking care of myself. Because what I was finding, the paradox here, was I was so invested in work that I was actually not liking work anymore, if that makes sense. I was getting buried alive by the stress of trying to perform and make sure that I was trying to fix everything, which is impossible. We can't fix everything. But I was eager. I was newly promoted into the job, and I wanted to impress. So something that she really did was put a mirror in front of my face and like, "You have got to slow down. By taking time for yourself and for us, you will have more to give." And she was 100% right. So I was the one person that didn't take vacations for a majority of my career until the last 4 years. I didn't. I like to travel, but we just didn't. That was a stressful thing for me if we had to take a trip, because it was like, well, what am I missing at the firehouse? I'm going to miss a fire. I'm going to miss a cool call. I'm going to be behind on work. And so giving myself that permission to just be like, "Hey, I need to unplug every once in a while, and that's okay. And I don't care what other people think about the way I unplug. I'm unplugging." We like to go to Disney. My boss makes fun of me about that nonstop, but I got little kids. They like to go. It's perfect. We like to go. And finding what makes you tick outside the firehouse, I think, is important. We have to have hobbies that are not work specific to be able to fulfill our souls in other ways. This job fulfills a huge part of who I am. I would say a majority of who I am, in the sense of my work, life balance. My family is the biggest. And so giving back to them and then giving back to myself, because you have to take care of yourself, is huge. Professionally, that has helped me professionally. With that was starting to go to conferences. A lot like what Mark was saying, training. I was fortunate here at Warrensburg. We always were trying to send people if we could, but there was many years we just didn't have the money. And that was a thing that was just like, hey, we can't. And it's nothing bad. It just was circumstance. And we've gotten to a place where, our city has been awesome, and our chief is doing great stuff, to where we could afford to send people to summer fire school, winter fire school, the Revolution, FDIC, go to different hot classes that are being offered in the area, bringing in people. And so for me, I get a lot out of, I'm a huge advocate of sending instructors to FDIC. I've gone last couple of years, I try to go, and then I try to bring one of my other instructors, one of my officers that has gone above and beyond to be working with their crews to help keep that fire alive in them. And I sitting down and having a drink at the end of the day at FDIC or having a meal and sharing that with other people that are just as passionate, I think is the best thing fire service wise for me to relight that excitement. Spending time away is huge. Going on vacation is huge, but that makes me refreshed and ready to hit the ground running. But taking that time for myself doesn't necessarily grow my knowledge at the same time about the job to make me excited to come back and teach about it. It makes me excited to come back to work, but it also doesn't do that other part. Going to a conference and talking to these other folks or doing things like we're doing right now, this is huge. I'm really enjoying this. I'm really happy you guys asked me to come on because it does refill my cup to sit and talk with other people that are just as passionate. So having those conversations and those talks, I think, is huge.
I know there's a lot to be said with all that, going to the conferences. I found with some of our guys, like the Fools conventions or the Fools meetings, if you guys have those where you're at, and like even going back to like listening to the stories, like that's one of the things, like for me being on Muddy River Fools up here in St. Louis, is they do like the training nuggets where somebody just shows, or like the biggest one like I've taken stuff away from is like guys will stand up like, hey, I screwed this up on a call the other day, don't do what I did. And just having those conversations. I've actually had some calls where I've been on like, oh man, like at the meeting last night, this guy talked about this, like, and now I'm seeing it, like I better not make that decision. But like just all those and passing that stuff on. But like, yeah, FDIC is huge, all that stuff, like just staying involved. And I think all of us have the same wives, because I'll come home, pull my laptop out, and she'll be like, oh, again? I'm like, I got this in my head, I got to get it down on paper.
Yeah.
Or me and Nick will be talking about something, I'm like texting back and forth, who are you talking to now? Like, oh, me and Nick we're getting this stuff figured out, or this other stuff going on. So I mean, it's find that balance kind of sucks. Like to hit on you were saying, Matt, like I had that eye opening a couple years ago. We were sitting there at work and somebody's like, what's your hobbies? I'm like, oh man,
I don't have any.
Yeah, I don't have any. I'm like, I work and I build, like I do training stuff, and then I do more training stuff, and even on my days off I travel and I do training stuff. It's like, oh my goodness, like that's an eye opener. Like I had that same thing where I had to like sit down and like really dive in. Like I need to restructure some stuff here, because like I love the job, I love it all, but yeah, it'll like the family needs some time too.
Right.
So
when we talk about mental health, right? And it's not always PTSD. A lot of it is just literally just getting through life, and this job takes a lot because we have to give a lot. And so it's like that's the easiest way to reinvest in your mental health, is actually do things for you, specifically for you, to help build you up. And it's a simple lesson, but firemen are terrible at learning that lesson. We're awful at it.
Agreed. I think those conferences and stuff that we go to, I always describe it as like a fire service dialysis, right? Because your day to day, you start getting bogged down, and you keep fighting, and you get to that slum or that burnout or whatever you want to call it. And then I like to go down to County Fire Tactics or FDIC, something like that. And you're on a group with a bunch of energized people that love the job and really into it, and you're among friends, so you're not afraid to be like, yeah, that's messed up, or be like, yeah, I love this, I want to scream it from the mountaintops or whatever. And you come back energized. And even vacations, it's just have to have that dialysis, kind of clean it out and get back in.
And that stuff's contagious. I mean, I've noticed that, like, guys come back from FDIC class, like guys come back from classes that we send them to. I mean, we're kind of got the luxury now where we can send people to classes. Like you said, Chief, up in Columbia, it's like, oh, you want to go to that? Yeah, sure, we'll make it happen. And like these guys are returning from these classes and like empowered and wanting to pass stuff on and wanting to dive in and look at stuff. So it's really starting to change a lot and build that up. And I think a lot of it, like we talked early on, recapping a little bit, was like the company officers. Like you get a good company officer that sees that, and with their newer guys, their guys come in and can build that and like help it grow. I mean, that's one of the biggest things I found, like in my position with doing training, is like leaning on some of my senior guys or even some of my newer guys. Like we talked about, if you don't, like, I don't know everything, but I got a guy that does, and let me lean on him a little bit, and he can run this training today, and I'm going to stand back and hopefully I'll pick something up from letting him talk about some of his stuff. Talked a lot about like newer guys coming in. You guys, what's some advice for these new kids coming in, getting on the job? Like, you want to pass along and share?
Keep learning. Always tell our new guys when they get out of the academy, I was like, everybody has an opinion, but right now I want you to listen to what people have to say. I don't want them to be scared, by no means. I want them to participate and be part of the crew. But as Matt said earlier, a lot of these new guys are eager coming out. I remember when I first got out of high school, I was a road grader operator. Man, I thought I knew everything. I worked with guys that was 50, 60 years old. I was 19, 20. But I sat back and I listened to all of them. And I tell the new guys, I'll use a hazmat sponge, be a sponge. Soak it up. All right. Not everything is good, right? Some of it you got to let it drip off. But what is good, you need to be able to store that and be able to use that for a good time. Always remain positive, right? Because they're going to hear negative stuff. That's the fire service, right? We just got to admit it. But they always got to stay positive, and you got to dig deep. And it's a very humble career. I mean, as I told somebody the other day, I was like, sometimes, my wife, she works for a business. She works for this person. Well, this person makes money off of them, right? And I'm not meaning it the wrong way, but in the fire service, we work for the customers that we serve. I'm not dictated by, everything that's got to be happening by the almighty dollar. We do the best thing that we do, and we're giving back to people, right? You can still volunteer on your days off as a hobby to do something different. But truly, let's think about it. We give up a lot of what we do on our daily lives. Our kids, I look, my kids are in their 20s now, and they're like, Dad, you weren't there for these games. You weren't for those. And so we have to prepare those new people for what they're going to miss, and how you can work through things. And as Matt said, mental health is huge, right? So if you can talk to them about trade times, you're going to have bad days. You're going to see things. Talk to people. It's okay. But what I always tell a new person is too, guess what? Usually within their 18th month evaluation, I put on there, I want them to teach a company training. And that's just, we got rookie books when they come off, they have to do a check off, but I want them to be able to, one, understand that they are part of a crew and their crew can learn from them also. So I think new guys hold a lot of positivity in what we're going to become within organizations.
I think for me, again, Mark hits so many good points. He's right. I call it the 80-20 rule, Mark. Listen 80, talk 20. With these guys, I teach them that and recruit. It's like it's okay to ask questions, and everybody has an opinion. You're dead on. Like, you need to be listening a little bit more to understand what the expectation is. And if you need to ask a clarifying question, please do. But I don't need you dictating how we're doing things. You have not earned that right yet. And that's not a bad thing. I think we got into almost a knee jerk that funny, I picked this up at talking with some other guys at a conference from multiple agencies. They're all going through the same thing of, we got these new guys on and they're great and they're gung ho and they're eager. But they're not patient, was something that they were running into. And it's almost like we're afraid to tell them to pump the brakes, and that they also need to be new. You need to do the chores. And I'm a firm believer. I judge a lot of people on if they can replace the toilet paper roll in the bathroom.
Yeah.
That's actually my biggest litmus test. Because if you don't have enough pride or consideration for the person coming in after you that's going to need that toilet paper, then that tells me you're thinking only about yourself. And this is a job where you can't do that. If you're only thinking about yourself, you're just going to hurt your team and you're going to hurt the citizens. And it's the little things. I'm a firm believer. It's the little actions that build up. Are you taking pride in your truck? The citizens entrusted you with a multi-million-dollar truck. Post-COVID, it's taking us years to get fire trucks after bids and specs. They're an all-time high on expense. And it's like, so, clean the apparatus. Take care of it. You have time. I'm not saying do busy work all the time, but if you're looking for something to do, find something that's constructive that makes this place better. Don't be afraid. You are not above mopping a floor, because I'm not above. I'll mop with you. If you don't know how to mop, I'll mop with you. But that's one of those things that we're like, ask for help. I would say every single one of my staff, and I am fully confident in this, if one of my new kids goes up to any member from one of our newest people above them all the way to the chief of the department and said, hey, chief, I don't know how to clean a bathroom. My parents never made me do it. I've never had to do it, and I'm 18 years old, and I don't know what to do. Every single one of us would go in there and show you the right way to clean a bathroom. And so it's like doing those things, I think it's missed. And I'm not trying to just harp on cleaning. I just think Mark hit so many good firefighting things. I kind of feel bad to ride your coach over on that, because he's right. But I also, another thing I tell him is pull hose every day. Get up there and pull line. Get used to pulling line. And so one of their answers back is, well, what if I'm not supposed to? Ask the captain. Be like, hey, Cap, is it okay if I go pull line? Are we getting ready to leave to go do a pre-plan or go out to get a meal? Talk to your senior guys on the truck and have them work with you. A lot of them aren't just going to sit and watch you, because they're going to get intrigued and be like, nope, you're doing that wrong. And then they're going to get up and want to do it with you. And then sometimes it turns into a competition and you guys have a great time. You need to be out looking for that. You need to be studying the trucks. And another thing I tell them too is you guys have got to earn that recliner seat. That was one of the things I asked my captains. We didn't have a problem with this, but I asked my captains, I was like, what's one thing each of you would like to see for the new people with recruits? And I kind of just did it informally. It wasn't a formal thing. I just, as I grabbed them, just like, hey, what are you seeing that we could do better? And one of my captains was like, tell them to resist the recliner for the first 6 months. And he goes, I noticed the other day a kid sat down, he was on his phone, he was on his break, but it was like, he's like, hey man, like maybe let the old guy in the corner who's now standing. We have an engine house that's really small and there's very limited seating. It's like, you didn't earn that seat. He did. He's been here 20 years. Like, let him sit down. Like, it's one of those things where offer your seat. It's teaching those things. I'm finding a lot with our newer guys that having that guided structure of having that mentor, find a mentor, find someone that your gut tells you is the right person. Mark's right. There's always somebody that maybe has some less than desirable habits and they like to talk a lot about the way they do things. And if you're impressionable, it's easy to fall into those. Trust your gut. If you're like, hey, this guy's pretty quiet, but he always seems to be getting stuff done. He's always checking his truck out and he's got his tools down and he seems to be solid. I would tell those new guys, trust your gut instinct. Go talk to that person, find a mentor, and get guidance on what to do. Anybody can do it. And just, again, take care of this place. This is your home. This is other people's homes. This is the citizens' property. And it is a privilege to get to be here. You're being paid to hang out with a bunch of friends. So in Kyle's case, apparently set up a massive, video game mega center, whatever you guys want to call it.
That's the other shift.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're the back of the bay crew. So
yeah, and so, but it's like everybody's got their thing, and if that's how they bond, that's awesome. But it's like one of those things where also you're being paid to be here. Take it seriously, and take care of it. So that'd be my biggest piece of advice.
Nice. Well, I think unless Kyle, you had anything to add to that.
No, man, this is a great talk.
Yeah.
This is all, I love it. Like, this is all stuff me and Nick sit and like text each other and talk about like every day. Like, oh man, like this is just one of those, like, get like-minded people on here and just have this conversation, because it's all great stuff, man. Like, this is awesome. Yeah.
The only other question I had, which I think Corley Moore does it on his podcast, but like what is your most fire related or leadership related or whatever must read books for all firefighters? You think you guys have one in mind?
I got a lot of them. So you want one or do you want multiple?
I just want one.
Just want one.
I'll throw out one that I just most recently read, and let's admit, a lot of the books kind of copy each other's books, right? Or it's not the exact same words, but it's the same theories or the same mythology, and maybe it's just that's how Mark perceives it all. But one of them that I really read that I kind of took to heart, because as a training safety captain at a position I took, I'm like, I want to get this guy's perspective. I actually wrote his name down so I don't say it wrong. David McGlynn. Have you all ever taken his class? He's coming around with a training officer class, and he actually wrote a book called The Training Officer. And actually reading through that, I mean, I think he kind of nails it. He talks off with some basic leadership skills. And then he comes back and talks about what it is to be a good safety officer. What do you have personally, the qualities you establish? What are you looking for? And how to provide that for your organization, whether it's volunteer or career, all of us are safety officers. Let's admit, right? All of us are training officers. And I think this book made me dig a little bit deeper into that position. So that's one I would recommend.
That's good. Man, I have a couple, but I can only say one, right? So this sucks. I have two. So does it have to be fire service related, or
No.
can it be folded into the fire service to be used for fire service?
Yeah, either one. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I'll stick to true fire service this time. You guys have me come back, I'll tell you the
Okay.
So The Dynamic Fire Chief by Craig Haig. So training officers, oftentimes we get caught up in teaching the firefighters and the company officers, and we forget about our battalions, our deputies, assistants, whatever you want to call them, and your fire chief. They need training too. And even though you may be an equal rank or below them, we need to be able to train them too. So Chief Haig wrote this amazing book, and it's pretty much how to be a fire chief. I'm not the chief of my department, but knowing his job better makes me better because I have a budget. I'm in charge of my department's, my division's budget for training. I'm also in charge of all of our EMS stuff. So I'm like sitting there working the books there. I'm also integral in our hiring committee. And so Chief Haig covers all that in his book. And it's absolutely amazing. Like he gives you like a worksheet at the end of each chapter of stuff to work on. And so I think it's a good book for anyone that's aspiring to be a chief officer one day, including battalions and up, because it covers all of that stuff in there. But it is definitely geared towards someone who wants to be that fire chief one day or provide training to that chief. My chief read the book before me, so he's already got a jump on me there. And he's been my mentor for years, so I don't know if I'm teaching him much of anything new. But it is good for me because I want to be able to assist those guys as well, because it's easy for me to forget about them. It's easy for me to forget about my fellow admin team and to forget about the battalions on operations because I'm so focused on my captains and my firefighters and my engineers. And so that's why I would recommend that one. It's a great read. Chief Haig makes it really simple and gives some amazing insight on how to basically run a department.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I think that about wraps it up. We're right at an hour and 40 minutes, so this was a good one. I really enjoyed talking to you guys.
Same.
All you three of you are, my go-to. I call them my go-to dudes whenever I need to bounce something off of somebody, or Chief Soer, you helped me out with the recent article thing, and really appreciative of all you guys. So thanks for coming on, and be safe out there. Keep being you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. It was a great time. I really enjoyed it.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having me on.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
And congrats, Chief, on the promotion. That's awesome.
Battalion chief. That's right. Keep learning
Chief.
every day.
Let's get Chief now.
Thanks.
All right. Take it
All
easy,
right.
guys. Have a good Thanksgiving.
See you guys. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Right
Thank
on.
you.
Thank you, guys.
was good stuff.